I let my wife chase empowerment with her single friends, gave her total freedom, and watched her learn the hard truth about independence and marriage. They always seem to need a committee to tell them how empowered they are. My wife found her committee at 32, and let me tell you, it was quite the transformation to watch. It started innocently enough. She joined this group of women who called themselves the Independent Queens. Yeah, I know, the name should have been my first red flag. These were mostly divorced women in their 30s, who spent their Friday nights at wine bars talking about how terrible their ex-husbands were, and how amazing their new single lives had become. My wife came home from her first meeting practically glowing. She sat me down at our kitchen table and explained how these women had opened her eyes to things she'd never considered. According to her new friends, she'd been living in a bubble, making decisions based on what I wanted instead of what she wanted. I asked her what decision she was talking about. We bought our house together, chose our furniture together, even picked our vacation destinations together. She couldn't give me a straight answer, just kept saying I wouldn't understand because I was a man. That's when I knew we had a problem. The meetings went from once a month to twice a month, then every Friday night. She'd come home with new vocabulary, words like authentic self and emotional labor and toxic masculinity. She started questioning everything we'd built together, from our morning coffee routine to our weekend plans. The real kicker came on a Tuesday evening. She walked into our living room where I was watching the game and announced she needed to talk. She'd been doing a lot of self-reflection with her group, and she realized she needed space to grow as an individual. I muted the television and looked at her. What kind of space are we talking about? She launched into this rehearsed speech about how she'd been defining herself through our relationship for too long. The group had helped her see that she needed to discover who she really was outside of being a wife. She was going to start having regular girls' nights where she could explore her independence. I almost laughed. Here was a woman who'd never had trouble speaking her mind, who'd always done exactly what she wanted, suddenly acting like she'd been some kind of prisoner in her own life. "So, you want to go out with your friends more often?" I said. "That's fine. You never needed my permission for that?" She shook her head. "It's not about permission. It's about understanding that I need to prioritize my own growth and happiness." The way she said it, like she was reading from a script, told me everything I needed to know. These women weren't just her friends anymore. They were her new advisors, and their advice was clearly that her marriage was holding her back. Over the next few weeks, the changes became more obvious. She started coming home later and later from these meetings. When I'd ask how her night was, she'd give me vague answers about deep conversations and breakthrough moments. She stopped telling me where they went or what they talked about. The worst part wasn't the secrecy. It was the way she started looking at me like I was some kind of obstacle she needed to overcome. Every suggestion I made, every opinion I offered, every normal husband thing I did was suddenly evidence of how I was limiting her potential. When I asked if she wanted to grab dinner at that Italian place we both loved, she sighed and said I was being predictable. When I suggested we plan a weekend trip, she said I was making assumptions about what she wanted to do with her free time. The group had convinced her that everything normal about our marriage was actually oppression in disguise, and the more she bought into their philosophy, the more she started treating me like the enemy. By the end of the month, she'd made her position clear. She was going to continue her journey of self-discovery with her empowered friends, and I could either support her growth or become part of the problem. Looking back, I should have seen what was coming. When someone starts talking about needing space to find themselves, they were usually preparing to tell you that themselves doesn't include you. But I had no idea just how far her new friends were willing to push her or how much they wanted her to become just like them. That's when things got really interesting. The girls' nights became a weekly institution, and with each one, my wife came home with a new grievance about our marriage that I'd somehow never noticed before. Apparently, the fact that I handled our finances made me a financial controller. The way I'd wake up early on Saturdays to make us both coffee was creating dependency patterns. Even holding doors open for her had become benevolent sexism. I'd sit there listening to these revelations, wondering if she was hearing herself talk. This was the same woman who used to thank me for taking care of the bills because she hated dealing with numbers. The same woman who'd smile every Saturday morning when I brought her coffee in bed. The group had given her a whole new lens to view our relationship through, and everything looked toxic when you squinted hard enough. The breaking point came on a Wednesday night. She walked in at almost midnight, reeking of wine and carrying a stack of books with titles like Reclaiming Your Power and The Emotionally Unavailable Man. She dropped the books on our coffee table and announced that she'd had an epiphany. "I've been living my life according to your expectations," she said, swaying slightly. But I'm done with that. I looked at the books, then at her. What expectations are those? She started counting on her fingers. Cooking dinner, keeping the house clean, being available whenever you want affection, pretending to enjoy your boring friends, watching sports I don't care about. I had to laugh. You mean the dinner you cook twice a week when you feel like it? The house that I clean more often than you do? The affection you initiate, half the time. And when have I ever forced you to hang out with my friends or watch sports? She waved her hand dismissively. You don't understand. It's not about what you say. It's about the pressure you create just by existing in this space. That's when I realized how deep this rabbit hole went. Her friends hadn't just convinced her that our marriage was problematic. They convinced her that I was problematic just by being a man who expected normal relationship dynamics. The next week, she came home with a new announcement. The group had decided that all committed women needed to experience what true independence felt like. They were going to start doing weekend retreats, where they could exist in a purely feminine space without male energy influencing their decisions. She'd signed up for a weekend at some cabin upstate with her enlightened sisterhood. It's just for 2 days, she said like she was asking permission. I need to see what it feels like to make choices without considering anyone else's needs. I shrugged. Have fun. She seemed surprised by my response. I think she expected me to object, to give her a reason to paint me as the controlling husband her friends kept telling her I was. When she came back from that weekend, she was different, more distant, more critical, more convinced that her friends understood her better than I did. She started sharing their wisdom with me, like I should be grateful for the education. Did you know that most women in relationships lose their sense of self because they're constantly adapting to their partner's needs? She asked one morning over breakfast. Is that what you think you've been doing? I asked. I know I have been, she said firmly, but I'm working on changing that. The changes started small. She stopped asking what I wanted for dinner and started making only what she wanted. She'd make plans for us without checking my schedule first, then get annoyed when I already had commitments. She started going out more often, not just with the group, but alone. I'm exploring my interests, she'd say when I'd ask where she was going. I spent too many years only doing things couples do. The irony was incredible. The woman who'd spent our entire relationship being completely herself, speaking her mind, pursuing her hobbies, and making independent choices, had somehow convinced herself she'd been living in oppression. But the real kicker came when she started bringing her friends around. These women would sit in our living room drinking our wine and discuss their journeys like they were war veterans sharing battle stories. They'd talk about their ex-husbands like they were escaped prisoners talking about their captors, and they'd look at me like I was next. One of them, a woman who'd been divorced twice, actually said to my wife, "You're so lucky to have this awakening while you're still young enough to start over." She said it right in front of me like I wasn't sitting there. Another one kept asking my wife pointed questions about our relationship. Does he support your dreams? Does he respect your boundaries? Does he make you feel hurt? The questions were designed to make normal relationship dynamics sound sinister. Of course, I supported her dreams. I'd encouraged her to go back to school, start her business, travel with friends. But somehow, the way they framed it made it sound like I should be doing more or differently or not at all. By the end of the month, my wife had adopted their entire philosophy. She started talking about emotional labor and how she'd been carrying too much of it. She complained about mental load and how I didn't understand the pressure she was under. The funny thing was, nothing had actually changed about our division of responsibilities. We'd always shared household tasks. We'd always made decisions together. We'd always supported each other's goals. But now everything normal felt like evidence of inequality to her. The group had given her a new story about our marriage, and she was determined to make that story true, even if it meant rewriting our entire history together. I realized then that I wasn't just losing my wife to her friends. I was losing her to an ideology that required her to see me as the enemy. And that's when she dropped the biggest bomb of all. The bomb came on a Thursday night, delivered with the same casual tone she'd used to tell me she was picking up groceries. I've decided to take a break from our relationship, she announced, standing in our bedroom doorway like she was making a business presentation. The group thinks I need to experience what it's like to live independently before I can truly know what I want. I was folding laundry and I didn't stop. A break. What does that mean exactly? She shifted her weight, clearly having rehearsed this speech. It means I'm going to move in with Rachel temporarily, just for a few weeks, maybe a month. I need space to figure out who I am without the influence of being in a couple. Rachel was the twice-divorced group leader, the one who'd been eyeing me like a future casualty of war. Of course, she'd offered to take my wife under her wing. So, you want to separate? I said, setting down the shirt I was folding. It's not a separation, she said quickly. It's a pause, a chance for me to grow as an individual, so I can come back to this relationship as a whole person instead of half of a codependent unit. The language was pure group speak. I could practically hear Rachel's voice coming out of her mouth. And what am I supposed to do during this pause? I asked. She looked surprised by the question. I don't know. Maybe use the time to think about what you want to. Maybe examine whether you've been treating me as an equal partner or just as someone who fits into your life. There it was. The implication that I was the problem, that I was the one who needed to change while she went off to find herself with her divorced friends. I sat down on the bed and looked at her. Let me get this straight. You want to move out of our home, live with another woman, and pretend we are not married while you decide if you actually want to be married. That's not how I'd put it, she said. But she didn't deny it. How would you put it? She launched into another rehearsed explanation about personal growth and authentic relationships and how sometimes you have to step back to move forward. It was like listening to a self-help audiobook. When she finished, I nodded. Okay. She blinked. Okay. Yeah. If that's what you need to do, then do it. She stared at me for a long moment. I could see the confusion in her eyes. This wasn't the reaction she'd expected. You're not going to fight for us? She asked. Fight for what? You just told me you don't know if you want to be married to me. You want to move out and live like a single woman while you decide if I'm worth staying with. What exactly am I supposed to fight for? She looked genuinely shocked. I thought you'd be upset. I thought you'd try to convince me to stay. Why would I do that? You're a grown woman. If you want to leave, leave. If you want to come back, we'll talk about it then. The conversation ended there, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. She'd expected drama, tears, maybe some begging. Instead, she got acceptance, and it clearly wasn't what she'd been prepared for. Over the next few days, she started packing her things. She'd glance at me occasionally, like she was waiting for me to break down and ask her to reconsider. Instead, I helped her pack. You'll probably want to take your winter coats, I said, pulling them out of our closet. And don't forget your good boots. She watched me fold her clothes into boxes with increasing bewilderment. You're being really calm about this. What's the alternative? Throwing a tantrum? Locking you in the house? You want to go live with Rachel and figure out if you want to be married? I get it. Rachel's got a lot of experience, with marriage not working out. She's probably got great advice. The sarcasm wasn't lost on her, but she didn't respond to it. When she finished packing, she stood in our living room looking around like she expected me to make one last plea for her to stay. I'll call you in a few days, she said. Maybe we can talk about how this is going. Sure, I said. Or you can call me when you figured out what you want. Either way is fine. She lingered at the door, clearly unsettled by my reaction. You know this doesn't mean I don't love you, right? I know what it means, I said. You love me enough to maybe come back if living with Rachel doesn't work out. She left without another word, and I found myself alone in our house for the first time in years. The quiet was actually nice. I made dinner for one, watched what I wanted on television, and went to bed in the middle of the mattress. No negotiations, no compromises, no walking on eggshells around someone who'd spent months treating me like an oppressor. 2 days later, she called. She sounded different, less confident, more uncertain. How are you doing? She asked. Good, I said. Really good, actually. How's the independent living experiment going? It's fine, different. Rachel's apartment is small and she has a lot of rules about her space. That's tough, but I'm sure you're learning a lot about yourself. Yeah, she said, but she didn't sound convinced. Is there something you needed? I asked. I was wondering if I could come by and get a few more things, some books and maybe my coffee maker. The coffee maker? I thought you were discovering your independence. Making your own coffee seems like a good place to start. She was quiet for a moment. The coffee maker was a wedding gift. I have a right to it. You absolutely do, I said. Come by whenever you want. I'll make sure I'm not here so you can take whatever you need without any pressure from me. Another long pause. You don't have to leave your own house. I know I don't have to. But you're trying to figure out who you are without male influence, right? I'm just trying to help you get the full experience. After she hung up, I realized something important. For the first time in months, I wasn't worried about saying the wrong thing or doing something that would set off another lecture about my unconscious patriarchal behavior. I was starting to remember what it felt like to be myself, instead of walking on eggshells around someone who decided I was the problem with her life. And that's when I started making some changes of my own. While my wife was discovering her authentic self at Rachel's apartment, I was rediscovering mine at home. And honestly, I was having a great time. The first thing I did was rearrange the living room. She'd always insisted on keeping the couch facing away from the television because it was better for conversation. I moved it back where it belonged, bought a bigger television, and set up my sound system the way I'd always wanted it. I started cooking the meals I actually enjoyed instead of the health-conscious dishes she preferred. I left my coffee cup on the counter without immediately washing it. I watched action movies without having to explain why I found them entertaining. For the first time in months, I wasn't walking on eggshells in my own home. She called again after a week, and this time she sounded even more uncertain. I was thinking maybe we could have dinner this weekend, she said, just to talk about how things are going. How things are going with what, I asked. With us, with this break. I want to make sure we're still communicating. I almost laughed. We're communicating right now. You called, I answered. Communication accomplished. I mean, really talking about our relationship, about what we're both learning from this experience. What I'm learning, I said, is that I really enjoy having the whole bed to myself, and I've been sleeping better than I have in months. How about you? What insights has Rachel been sharing about the nature of marriage? She was quiet for a moment. It's not about Rachel. It's about me figuring out what I want, right? And how's that going? It's complicated. Living with someone else is different than I expected. Rachel has very specific ways of doing things, and she doesn't really like having someone else in her space long term. Sounds like she's not as empowered and independent as she pretends to be, I said. Maybe she's just not used to sharing her space because her relationships don't tend to last very long. That's not fair. You're right. It's not fair to point out that your relationship guru has a track record of failed marriages. That's probably irrelevant to the advice she's giving you about marriage. She sighed. Can we just have dinner? I feel like we're not connecting. We're connecting fine. You wanted space to figure out if you want to be married to me. I'm giving you that space. What's the problem? The problem is that you're acting like you don't care whether I come back or not. And there it was. The real issue wasn't that I was being controlling or unsupportive. The problem was that I wasn't being devastated by her absence. I care, I said, but I'm not going to sit here miserable and lonely while you decide if I'm worth staying with. I've got a life to live too. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm not putting my life on hold while you have your quarter-life crisis at 32. If you want to come back, great. If you don't, I'll survive. She hung up without saying goodbye, and I went back to enjoying my evening. The next weekend she showed up unannounced. I was in the garage organizing my tools when she walked in, looking around like she was seeing the place for the first time. You changed things, she said. I moved some furniture around. It's still the same house. She wandered into the living room and saw the new television setup. This is very masculine, yeah. Turns out when you don't have to compromise on everything, you can set things up the way you actually like them. She sat down on the couch and looked uncomfortable. I thought maybe we could talk about us, about where we stand. I sat down in my chair, the one I'd moved back to its original spot where I could actually see the television. Where do you think we stand? I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out. How's the figuring going? It's been 2 weeks. She looked frustrated. It's not that simple. Rachel says it can take months to really understand what you want when you've been in a codependent relationship. Rachel says a lot of things. How much of what Rachel says is actually helping you? What do you mean? I mean, you've been living with her for 2 weeks. You've been getting the full dose of her wisdom every day. Are you happier? Do you feel more empowered, more authentic? She was quiet for a long moment. It's different than I expected. How so? She's very set in her ways. And she talks about her ex-husbands constantly. Like every conversation somehow comes back to how terrible men are and how much better her life is now. Sounds inspiring. And she has all these rules about everything. What time to eat, what shows to watch, when to go to bed. She says it's about maintaining boundaries, but it feels more controlling than anything you've ever done. I nodded. Interesting. And the other women in the group keep asking me when I'm going to file for divorce, like they're expecting me to or hoping I will. Are you? She looked at me with surprise. Are you asking me to? I'm asking what you want. That's what this whole thing is about, right? You figuring out what you want. She stared at me for a long moment. I want you to fight for me. I want you to tell me you can't live without me and ask me to come home. Why? Because that's what someone does when they love someone. I leaned back in my chair. Or maybe what someone does when they love someone is respect their decision to leave. Maybe fighting for someone who doesn't want to be fought for is actually selfish. You don't want me to come back? I want you to come back because you want to be here, not because I convinced you or guilt you into it. I want you to come back because you actually want to be married to me, not because you're afraid of being alone. She sat there looking lost, and I realized that's exactly what she was. She'd expected me to be the desperate husband, begging her to reconsider. Instead, she was getting a man who was perfectly fine, with or without her. "I don't know what I want," she said finally. "Then you should probably keep figuring it out," I said. "Take all the time you need." She left that afternoon looking more confused than when she'd arrived, and I went back to enjoying my Saturday exactly the way I wanted to spend it. The irony wasn't lost on me. The more space I gave her, the more she seemed to want to come back, but I wasn't playing games. I was just refusing to play hers. 3 weeks into her journey of self-discovery, I decided it was time to make some practical adjustments to my life. If she was going to live like a single woman, I was going to live like a single man. I started by calling our bank and removing her access to our joint accounts. She'd wanted financial independence, so I figured I'd help her achieve it. I kept enough money in the joint account to cover her half of this month's expenses, but everything else went into my personal account. Next, I canceled the credit cards she'd been using. She could apply for her own credit if she wanted to buy things. Independence means being responsible for your own finances, right? I also called our insurance company and removed her from our policy. She could get her own coverage through her job or find something on the marketplace. The phone rang that evening. "What did you do?" she said, clearly panicked. "I updated our financial arrangements to match your living situation," I said calmly. "You're exploring independence, so I thought you'd appreciate not having to rely on me for money. I tried to use my credit card today and it was declined. That's because I canceled it. You're living with Rachel now, figuring out who you are without being tied to me. Having access to my money would defeat the purpose. That's not. I didn't mean financial independence. I meant emotional independence." "Oh, I see. You want to be emotionally independent while remaining financially dependent. That's not really independence, is it? You can't just cut me off from our money. It's not our money anymore. You moved out, remember? You're taking a break from our relationship. People on relationship breaks don't typically share bank accounts." She was quiet for a moment. "What about the house? What if I want to come back?" "You can come back anytime you want. Just let me know when you've decided what you want." "But what if I can't afford to live with Rachel without access to our accounts?" "Then you'll have to make a choice. You can come home and work on our marriage, or you can figure out how to support your independent lifestyle independently." "This isn't fair." "What's not fair is expecting me to subsidize your experiment in being single while you decide if you want to stay married to me." She hung up and I went back to my evening. I was making grilled cheese and watching a documentary about sharks, simple pleasures. The next day, she called again. "Rachel says what you're doing is financial abuse," she said. "Rachel would know about abuse considering how many relationships she's been in," I replied. "But cutting off financial support for someone who moved out isn't abuse. It's logical." "I need time to figure things out. You have time. You just have to fund that time yourself. I can't afford to pay Rachel rent and cover my own expenses. Sounds like a problem you need to solve. Maybe Rachel can give you some advice about financial independence. She's been managing on her own for years." Over the next few days, she called several more times. Each conversation revealed more about her living situation with Rachel. Apparently, Rachel charged her friends rent to stay in her apartment, had strict rules about everything from food to visitors, and spent most evenings complaining about men. "She wants me to pay for half of everything, even though I'm sleeping on her couch," she said during one call, "and she keeps telling me I should be grateful for the opportunity to see what single life is really like." "Are you grateful?" "It's not what I expected. She's always angry about something, and she doesn't seem very happy for someone who's supposedly living her best life." Maybe happiness isn't about being single or married. Maybe it's about being with people who actually want to be with you. What's that supposed to mean? It means Rachel wants you to be single because misery loves company, and you want me to be miserable because you expected me to fall apart when you left. I didn't want you to be miserable. No, you wanted me to be desperate. You wanted me to beg you to come back so you could feel wanted and important. Instead, you got a husband who's perfectly fine with or without you. She was quiet for a long moment. "Are you seeing someone else?" "No, I'm just enjoying my life." "How can you be enjoying your life when your wife left you?" "Because my wife didn't leave me. She left to figure out if she wants to be my wife. There's a difference. I do want to be your wife." "Then come home." "It's not that simple." "It actually is that simple. You want to be married to me, you come home and we work on our marriage. You don't want to be married to me. You stay where you are and we figure out divorce. The only thing that's complicated is you trying to have it both ways." She hung up again, but I could hear the wheels turning. The reality of supporting herself while living with someone who charged her rent to sleep on a couch was setting in. 3 days later, she showed up at the house with all her stuff. She stood in our doorway with 2 suitcases and a defeated expression, looking like she'd just finished a really unpleasant vacation. "I want to come home," she said. I looked at her bags, then at her. "Why?" "Because I figured out what I want. I want to be married to you." "What changed your mind?" She shifted uncomfortably. Living with Rachel was eye-opening. She's bitter about everything, and she wanted me to be bitter too. Every conversation was about how terrible men are, and how I should be angry at you for things you never even did, and I realized I wasn't unhappy with our marriage. I was unhappy with myself. And her group convinced me that you were the reason for my unhappiness. I stepped aside to let her in, but I didn't help with her bags. "So, you're saying Rachel's advice wasn't helpful?" "She charged me $600 to sleep on her couch for 3 weeks. She made me pay for half the groceries but wouldn't let me cook what I wanted. She had rules about everything: when to shower, what television shows we could watch, when I could use the phone. Sounds like you got a taste of what real control looks like." "I'm sorry," she said, setting her bags down. "I was wrong about everything. Our marriage wasn't the problem. I was the problem." I sat down in my chair, the one I'd moved back to where I could see the television properly. "What makes you think I want you back?" She stared at me. "Because I'm your wife. You were my wife when you decided to move out and live with another woman while you figured out if you wanted to stay married to me. That was a mistake. Was it? Or was it exactly what you needed to do to figure out what you actually wanted?" She looked confused. "I don't understand. You spent months telling me how unhappy you were in our marriage. You convinced yourself that I was holding you back from being your authentic self. You moved out to discover who you really were without me. And I discovered that I want to be with you. Or you discovered that living with Rachel was worse than living with me. Those are 2 different things." She sat down on the couch looking tired. "I know I hurt you. I know I was wrong, but I'm here now and I want to fix things." "Here's the thing," I said. "I don't need you to fix anything. I've been perfectly happy for the past 3 weeks. I like having the house to myself. I like not walking on eggshells around someone who's constantly analyzing everything I do for signs of toxic masculinity. I won't do that anymore. You won't do it until your next group meeting, or until you read another book about empowerment, or until one of your friends plants another seed of doubt in your head." She shook her head. "I'm not going back to the group. I'm done with all of that." "Why?" "Because I realize they don't want me to be happy. They want me to be single and angry like them." Rachel was actually disappointed when I told her I wanted to come home. She said I was making a mistake and that I'd regret it. She's probably right. "What do you mean?" I leaned forward. "You're here because living with Rachel sucked, not because you genuinely want to be married to me. You're here because being financially independent is harder than you thought. You're here because you ran out of other options. That's not true. Isn't it? 3 weeks ago, you were convinced that I was the problem with your life. Now you're convinced that Rachel was the problem. What happens when you decide someone else is the problem?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I love you. I love you too. But love isn't enough when someone doesn't actually want to be where they are. I do want to be here. You want to be here more than you want to be at Rachel's apartment. That's not the same thing." She started crying and I felt a familiar urge to comfort her. But I stayed in my chair. "I made a mistake," she said through tears. "I let other people convince me that what we had wasn't good enough. But I know better now. Do you? Or do you just know that the alternative was worse?" She looked at me with desperate eyes. "What do you want me to say?" "I don't want you to say anything. I want you to think about whether you're here because you want to be my wife or because you don't want to be Rachel's roommate. I want to be your wife. Then prove it. Not with words, but with actions. Show me that you're here because you choose to be, not because you ran out of other choices." She wiped her eyes. "How do I do that?" "You figure it out. Just like you figured out that Rachel wasn't the answer to your problems." She picked up her bags and went to our bedroom. I heard her unpacking, moving around, trying to settle back into a space she'd abandoned. Later that night, she came out to the living room where I was watching television. "The group is meeting tomorrow night," she said. "They want me to come and talk about my experience. Are you going?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to tell them what I really think about their advice." "And what do you really think?" She sat down on the couch. "I think they're a bunch of divorced women who want everyone else to be divorced too. I think they convinced me to throw away something good because they couldn't stand seeing me happy. So tell them that. You think I should go? I think you should do whatever you want to do. But do it because you want it, not because you think it's what I want you to do." She nodded. "I'm going to go." I'm going to tell them exactly what I think of their empowerment philosophy. Good. And then I'm going to come home and work on being the wife you deserve. Work on being the wife you want to be, I corrected. If those are the same thing, great. If not, we'll deal with that when it happens. She looked at me with something like respect in her eyes. You really would be okay if I left again, wouldn't you? I'd survive just like I survived the last 3 weeks. That's what I love about you, she said. You don't need me. You want me? That's the difference between a husband and a hostage, I said. She laughed. For the first time in months. Rachel's going to hate hearing about this. Rachel's going to hate hearing that her latest recruit decided she liked being married after all. She's going to say, I'm making a mistake. She's been making mistakes for years. I wouldn't worry too much about her opinion. My wife went to that meeting the next night, and when she came home, she was smiling. How did it go? I asked. I told them the truth. I said their advice nearly cost me my marriage, and that living independently wasn't as empowering as they claimed. How did they take it? They said I was brainwashed by the patriarchy, and that I'd be back when I realized my mistake.
And what did you say?
I said they were right about one thing. I probably would be back, but it would be to recruit other women away from their toxic advice. She sat down next to me on the couch. I'm done with all of that. I'm done letting other people tell me what my marriage should look like. Good, I said, because I'm pretty happy with what our marriage looks like when you're actually in it. She smiled and leaned against me. You know what's funny? What? I spent all that time trying to find my authentic self, and it turns out my authentic self is someone who likes being married to you. Imagine that. Rachel's going to be so disappointed. She was already planning my divorce party. Well, I said, I guess she'll have to throw it for someone else. And that's how I helped my wife become a permanent full member of the Empowered Single Friends Club, by showing her exactly what single life was really like and letting her choose what she actually wanted, instead of what other people told her she should want. Sometimes the best way to save a marriage is to be willing to let it go. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.